This story is a science fiction story by Roald Dahl. Here, when this story was written long back, 50, 60 years back, then poet, the author is talking about a machine which can have the power to write stories, plot, novel, etc. So when this story was written, this was purely a science fiction story. But now when I'm making the video in 2023, this is not fully a science fiction story. It's not a sci-fi because most of the imagination of Roald Dahl has become true by now. So we have to keep in mind that this story was written long back, uh, 50 years back. So keeping that in mind, let us begin the story line by line. So if you have the book, I request you to take out your book and follow me in the video line by line. So the story begins when there are two characters in this story. One, a scientist called Adolf Knipe, Knipe, Adolf Knipe, and the owner of the farm called Mr. Bolem. So there are two important characters here. One, Adolf Knipe, and Mr. Bolem. So the story begins when this company of Mr. Bolem, the Great Grammatizer company, has made one of the greatest machine of the world, which can do the calculation very, very fast, faster than any human being can. So the story begins when this company have completed making one of the greatest calculators of that time, which can calculate so many things. So the story begins when the boss is talking to his employee and he's very happy. So the boss is saying, well, Knife, my boy, now it is finished. So the boss is saying to his scientist, employee, okay, Knife, Adolf Knife is a scientist and the boss is called Bohlen, Bolen. So Bolen is asking, Mr. Bolen, the owner is asking his scientist, well, Knife, my boy, now it is finished. I just called you to tell you that you have done a very good job. So मालिक अपने साइंटिस्ट एम्प्लॉय से बोल रहा है कि मैंने तुम्हें ये बुलाया है ये बोलने के लिए कि तुमने एक बहुत अच्छा काम किया है. You have made really a good machine. Adolf Knife stood in front of desk. So the scientist was standing in front of the boss's desk. There seems to be no enthusiasm in him. He is not very interested. इसके बॉडी लैंग्वेज में, टोन में, वोकल कैपेसिटी में कुछ एंथुसियाज्म, कोई ज़ील, कोई जज्बा ही नहीं है. ठंडा पैसिव है. वी विल कम टू न्यू वाई. Aren't you please, boss? एम्प्लॉय से पूछ रहा तुम खुश नहीं हो? इतना अच्छा मशीन बना के you got such a good assignment. Oh yes, Mr. Bolen, yes. इसी हम खुश हैं कि हमने एक अच्छा मशीन बनाया. Did you see what the paper said this morning? So the boss is asking his employee. मालिक अपने साइंटिस्ट नौकर से पूछ रहा है, एम्प्लॉय से पूछ रहा है कि तुम्हें पता है आज के न्यूज़पेपर ने हमारे कंपनी के बारे में छापा है, क्या कहा है? The man behind the desk pulled out a newspaper and he began to read. So the Malik, Mr. Bolem, is reading the newspaper to his employee to motivate him and to tell him that your work is so much accepted. So Mr. Bolem, the owner of the company, is reading this part of the newspaper. So, and I quote what he's reading. So it's a part from the newspaper. Malik अपने साइंटिस्ट एम्प्लॉय के सामने के न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ के उसको मोटिवेट करने का कोशिश कर रहा है, बोल रहा है. एंड द न्यूज़पेपर सेज the building of the great automatic computing engine ordered by the government some time ago is now complete. It is probably the fastest electronic calculating machine in the world. Its function is to satisfy everything increasing need of science, industry, administration for rapid calculation, in which in the past administration method would have been physically impossible, would have required more than the problem justified the speed with which the new engine works, said Mr. Bolem, the owner of the head of the electrical engineering firm responsible for the construction, may be grasped by the fact that it can provide the correct answer in 5 seconds to a problem that will occupy a mathematician for a month. तो ये न्यूज़पेपर में छपा है कि गवर्नमेंट ने एक ऑर्डर दिया था एक बहुत बड़ा कैलकुलेटिंग इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कैलकुलेटिंग मशीन बनाने के लिए जो साइंस इंडस्ट्री एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में सब में जगह काम आएगा और कोई भी प्रॉब्लम ये सॉल्व कर सकता है और इसका स्पीड इतना है कि ये 5 सेकंड में वो काम कर सकता है। मिस्टर बोलम द ओनर ऑफ द कंपनी हैज सेड, इलेक्ट्रिकल इंजीनियर्स के ओनर ने कहा ये वो काम कर सकता है जो एक इंसान को मंथ लगेगा करने में, इन 3 minutes। न्यूज़पेपर में लिखा हुआ है द मशीन कैन प्रोवाइड, द ग्रेट ग्रामेटाइजर मशीन कैन प्रोवाइड कैलकुलेशन बाय that would fill million sheets of full scale paper। मैंने पूरा पेपर में 1 million पेपर जो कैलकुलेशन करने में टाइम लगेगा वो 3 मिनट में ये मशीन बना सकती है। The automatic computing machine uses pulses of electricity generated at the rate of millions a second। मतलब इलेक्ट्रिसिटी से चलता है और 1 मिलियन में कितना पल्स चलते रहता है, ये बहुत जल्दी जल्दी काम होता है। To solve all the calculation, the resolve themselves in addition, subtraction, multiplication, division for any practical purpose that it can do। So ये न्यूज़पेपर में लिखा हुआ है कि न्यूज़पेपर में छपा है कि मिस्टर बोलन ने कहा है कि जो 1 मिलियन पेपर में जो कैलकुलेशन है वो 3 मिनट में ये मशीन कैलकुलेट करके कर सकता है और ये मशीन मतलब सब्सट्रैक्शन, एडिशन, मल्टीप्लिकेशन, डिवीजन कोई भी mathematical calculation कर सकता है। So in the first page of the story we come to know that there are two characters, one the owner of the company called Mr. Bolan and the employee, the scientist called Adolf Knight। They have been given this assignment, this project, this tender by the government to make the fastest electronic computing machine, and they have been successful in doing it, and the news has been published in the newspaper। So this is the premise of the story, that Mr. Bolan has got a tender from the government and the government का ये टेंडर जो है इन्होंने सक्सेसफुली बना दिया है और सक्सेसफुली बनाने के बाद इनका न्यूज़पेपर में छपा है। So we come to know that they were not ordinary people, they must have been very great scientists, क्योंकि दुनिया का सबसे फास्टेस्ट इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कंप्यूटिंग मशीन बनाना कोई आम आदमी की बात तो होगी नहीं। So this proves that they must have been a very powerful organization, and Adolf Knight must have been substantially good at his work। So the first page में ये हुआ कि मालिक, the owner of the company, is talking to his employee and he is trying to say him that you have done a good job by reading a part of the newspaper which was praising the machine made by Mr. Bolan's company, which was actually made by the scientist called Adolf Knight। Mr. Bolan glanced at long, melancholy face at the younger owner। Aren't you proud, Mr. Knight? Aren't you pleased? तो मालिक पूछ रहे हैं अपने साइंटिस्ट से कि तुम्हें खुशी नहीं हुई कि तुम इतना अच्छा मतलब we have done such a good job as a company। Of course, Mr. Bolan, I don't think I have to remind you that your own contribution now, actually the scientist hates his boss, like most places in the corporate world, but he cannot say it on this, right? अपने बॉस को भी नहीं बोल सकते आपको चुचुंदर जैसा चेहरा है या कॉकरोच जैसा आपका नाक है। So you have to say good things, right? So he's saying, I don't think, sir, I have to remind you that your own contribution to the original plan was an important। So यहाँ पे बटरिंग हो रही है साइंटिस्ट से बॉस के, सर आपने भी बहुत अच्छा काम किया था, आप नहीं होते तो ये प्रोजेक्ट शायद ड्राइंग रूम में रह जाता, तो अभी रियल नहीं होता। Adolf Knight moved his feet on the carpet and he watched the two small white hands of his chief, the nervous finger playing on the paper clip, unbending it। So Adolf Knight is observing his superior boss। Okay, he did not like the man's side, he did not like the face side। मतलब the employee does not like the master and the master does not like the employee, but still they have to work। So Adolf Knight, he did not like the man's side, he did not like his face either, with his teeny mouth and narrow purple color। It was unpleasant the way his lower lid moved। So जब भी Adolf Knight बात करता है, उसका लोअर लिप्स ऐसे होता और वो हाथ हिलाते रहता, उसका चेहरा भी अजीब था, पर्पल कलर लिप्स था। So the owner is asking, is anything bothering you, Knight? Anything on your mind? Oh no, Mr. Bolan, no. Would you like to take a week's holiday? You have already earned it। So the owner is asking his employee, you are looking so sad and low, do you want to have a holiday? because you have already achieved such a success, you have earned it, so you should be given a holiday. So he's asking, do you need a holiday? So the employee is saying, scientist employee is saying, engineer is saying, I don't know. The older man waited with his thin person who stood sloppy before him. मतलब अजीब सा खड़ा रहता था, straight नहीं, उसे sloppy. He was a difficult boy. मालिक बोल रहा है कैसा ही है, सीधा खड़ा नहीं हो सकता, ऑलवेज ड्रूपिंग, ऑलवेज अनटाइडी, जैकेट अजब है, बाल ऐसे बिखरा हुआ है. So the owner is saying, I like you to take a holiday, you need it. So the Mr. Bolan is saying to adult like the scientist that you should go for a holiday. All right, sir, if you wish. So employee is saying adult like, ठीक है सर, अगर आप छुट्टी दे रहे हैं तो मैं ले लूंगा. Take a week, if needed, take 2 weeks. Go somewhere warm. ये ठंडा country है ना. So he's saying go somewhere जहाँ बहुत धूप निकलता हो, ताकि थोड़ा motivation आए. Sun bath लो. Go somewhere where there is a lot of sunshine. Go and relax. Okay, then take, relax, swim, relax करो, छुट्टी मनाओ, फिर जब वक्त मिले तो तब. So in the second page we come to know that in spite of making the world fastest electronic calculator, the scientist who made it, called Adolf Knight, is not happy, and the boss is trying to motivate him by giving him 2 weeks holiday. Adolf Knight, the scientist who made the, according to the story, the world's fastest electronic calculator machine, he went home by bus to his 2-room bedroom, 2 BHK room. He threw his coat on the sofa, poured himself a whiskey, and sat down in front of a typewriter. जब ये story लिखा गया था, तब कंप्यूटर नहीं था, लैपटॉप्स नहीं थे, तब 1950s, 60s, तब ये टाइपराइटर हुआ करता. So adult Knight, instead of taking holiday, he's working double, he's working harder. He sat down in front of the typewriter that was on the table. Mr. Bolam was right. Of course he was right, except that he did not know half of it. So अभी employee सोच रहा है कि हमको holiday तो चाहिए, लेकिन मालिक मिस्टर बोल है, हमको ये नहीं पता है कि actually holiday किस लिए चाहिए. He probably thought it was a woman. Normally it happens. It seems even it happens in England that when a young man is sad, people assume that it's a love affair. Whenever a young man gets depressed, people always think ladki ka chakkar. He leaned forward and began to read the half-finished typing still in the machine. So he was typing something half-finished, he was reading it. A narrow escape, it was actually a story. The night was dark and stormy. The rain poured down like cats and dogs. So it's a part of a typewriter में लिखा हुआ था एक कहानी का शुरुआत. रात बहुत अच्छा था, हवा बह रहा था, पानी बहुत आ रहा. Adult Knight was sitting in front of his, like on sitting in front of his laptop. Adult Knight was sitting in front of his typewriter. So he took a sip of whiskey, a good whiskey का पिया. When the bitter malt flowing his cold liquid traveled his throat, the bitter liquid of whiskey इसके throat से गया. He felt cool and spreading. And जब ये शराब का नशा आया, ये सोचने लगा, do hell with Mr. Bolam anyway. Do hell with this machine, do hell with everything. तो जैसे शराब का नशा चढ़ने लगा, he's saying hell with everything. At exactly that moment, his eyes began to slowly open. He sort of wondered. अभी नशा थोड़ा हुआ तो ये सोचने लगा. And slowly, he raised his head and still, absolutely motionless, gazing at the wall opposite, with a look that was more perhaps of astonishment than of wonder. इसके चेहरे पे अब ताज्जुब है. एक जगह वो देखे जा रहा है. कौन? Adolf Knight was sitting in front of the typewriter. He's not moving, remaining 40-60 seconds quiet. Then gradually a subtle change came over his. अब इसके दिमाग में ना वो क्या बोलते हैं, idea click करते हैं. And suddenly he has thought of this machine which can produce novels and stories that we'll come to know. A very slight, only around the corners of this mouth, increasing. ये ऐसे ऐसे थोड़ा पहले ऐसा, फिर धीरे धीरे स्माइल जो है चारों तरफ फैल गई. It was the first time Adolf Knight has smiled in many months. तो बहुत दिन बाद हुआ ऐसा कि Adolf Knight जो है कभी हंसता है. So this proves that if they ask in the exam to write the character of Adolf Knight, so to write that he is a very morose, sad, grouch kind of person who is always very sad. Of course, he said, speaking loudly, It is completely ridiculous. And again he smiled, raising his upper lips and his teeth in a cruel, sensuous manner. So he is saying to himself, a scientist that talk to himself, is saying it's ridiculous, unbelievable हम जो सोचने वाले हैं. ये upper lip ऐसे करके मुस्कुरा रहे, बोले possible नहीं. It's a ridiculous idea, but so impractical that does not really make sense. This is कितना अजीबो-गरीब बात है कि लग रहा है possible ही नहीं हो. From then on, adults now began to think about nothing else. अब ये monomaniacal मतलब focus. अब उसका एक ही चीज पे focus है, how to create that machine जो story novel लिख सकता. The idea fascinated him, an idea attracted him. कौन सा idea? The idea to create a machine which can produce novel and stories. मतलब बिना लिखे. मतलब उसमें जैसे ChatGPT और Bard or like any AI in the modern world. At first, remember, let me remind you, the story was written long back, but there was no computer, mind you, 50, 60 years back. However, remote revenging himself in a most devilish manner upon his greatest enemies. From this angle alone, he toyed idly about it, perhaps 10 or 15 minutes, all himself examining it seriously. अब वो अपने आइडिया को ना टॉय कर, ना सोच के चारों तरफ से देख रहा है, सोच रहा है कहाँ तक प्रैक्टिकली पॉसिबल है. He took paper and made some notes. नोट्स ज्यादा दूर गया नहीं. He found himself immediately against the old truth. फिर वो सोच रहा है कि मशीन क्या खुद से कुछ नया लिख पाएगा. This is the core concept of the story, that the machine, however ingenious, however creative, cannot make its own original thought. But now the modern science, modern AI, modern technology is saying that machine can produce an original thought. So when the story was written, this was a very disturbing thought process. क्या machine क्या capable है original thought के लिए? It can handle no problem except that is given. मतलब वो वही problem solve कर सकता है जो उसके अंदर feed किया गया हो, और वो एक ही correct answer दे सकता है. This was a stumbler, a kind of block, blocked down. There doesn't seem to be any way around. एक तो रास्ता stumbled हो गया, बंद हो गया. A machine cannot have a brain. मैंने उस जमाने का सोचा कि machine खुद से थोड़ी सोच सकता है. उसमें जो मेमोरी होगा उसे मेमोरी से सोच सकता है. On the other hand, it can have a memory. Can it not? मेमोरी होता है. मेरे इस लैपटॉप का मेमोरी, आपका फोन का मेमोरी होगा जिस पे देखते होगे. लेकिन उसका क्या ब्रेन है? This electronic calculator had a marvelous memory. Simply by converting the pulses into a column of mercury, it can waves, and it can convert thousands of things at a time. So it is based on a grand memory. Does it have a brain? Now what about it? Then suddenly he was struck by a powerful but simple little fact. English grammar is governed by the rules that is mathematical in strictness. So he's saying कि अगर calculator maths कर सकता है, मतलब इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कैलकुलेटर का मैथ्स कर सकता है, तो कंप्यूटर जो है ग्रामर का रूल जान के ग्रामर का बुक्स लिख सकता है, स्टोरी लिख सकता है, नॉवेल्स लिख सकता है. इफ ए कैलकुलेटर कैन कैलकुलेट मैथ्स, द मशीन कैन कैलकुलेट वर्ड्स एंड कैन राइट इट डाउन. सो दिस इज द ग्रेट रेवलेशन दैट एडल्फ नाइफ अंडरस्टूड कि अगर इंसान चाहे तो एक ऐसा मशीन बना सकता है जो इंग्लिश ग्रामर का रूल्स जानने के बाद उस रूल्स को यूज करके कुछ खुद से लिख सकता है. Given the words and given the sense of what it is to be, there is only one correct answer. मतलब मैथ्स का एक ही करेक्ट आंसर होता है, लेकिन स्टोरी का तो बहुत सारा अप्रोच हो सकता है. No, he thought that's not quite accurate. In many sentences there are many alternatives, many phrases. But what the hell? The theory itself is true. बोल रहा सोच रहा पॉसिबल है क्या कि एक मशीन बन सकता है जो स्टोरी और नॉवेल लिख ले. Therefore, it stands to reason that an engine built by the lines of electronic computer could be adjusted to use words and grammars according to rules of grammar. So, अगर इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मशीन से मैथ्स का कैलकुलेशन हो सकता है, तो इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मशीन से ग्रामर सीख के वो ग्रामर का भी सही यूजेस कर सकता है. अगर मशीन में वर्ड, एडजेक्टिव, प्रोनाउन, स्टॉक ऑफ वर्ड, वोकैबुलरी दे दिया जाए तो प्लॉट बना देगा, सेंटेंसेस बना देगा. अब मिस्टर नाइफ को आइडिया मिल गया, वो रुक नहीं सकता. इवेंट टू वर्क, अपने काम में लग गया. विथ इंटेंस लेवल, एक्सट्रीम फोकस. हम लोग की तरह मोबाइल हटा के एकदम and his living room was littered, मैंने पिघरा हुआ था, कहीं फॉर्मूला, कहीं कैलकुलेशन. फॉर्मूला इज मतलब प्लूरल फॉर्म ऑफ फॉर्मूला. कहीं वर्ड्स है, कहीं प्लॉट्स है, कहीं स्टोरीज है, कहीं थेसरस है. सब वो जो है कंप्यूटर में धीरे धीरे फीड हो जाएगा अपने आप. उसमें ड्राइंग है, मतलब मशीन में सब वो डालने का सिस्टम है. ओके, टाइपराइटर में मैंने सब कुछ अब डालने का सिस्टम हो रहा है. ओके, मशीन में बहुत सारा वो बटन लगाना पड़ेगा, जैसे ऐसे घुमाने से यू कैन लेबल लाइक फेमस अमेरिकन मैगजीन. सो ही स्टार्टेड मेकिंग स्वीज सर्किट्स वायर, जिससे सब डाटा फीड होते रहेगा. ही वाज वर्किंग इन अ मूड ऑफ एक्सल्टेशन, मतलब बहुत खुश था. पेपर इधर पकड़े थे, अपने आप से जोर जोर से बात कर रहा था. ओके, अब वो सोच रहा था एडिटर, जो एडिटर लोग इसको रिजेक्ट किया, ही इज नॉट सेइंग, या वही एडिटर लोग दे विल पब्लिश स्टोरी. और ऐसे ही 15 दिन कंप्लीट करने के बाद he went to his boss, Mr. Bolan, okay, the head of the electrical engineers. So 15 दिन में ये पूरा तैयारी कर लिया. Now he cannot make the machine himself. He has to. He is working in a company, so he has to take the permission of his boss, the superior of his head. Mr. Bolan was pleased to see him. Well, Knight. Now still Knight, adult Knight is still looking very dejected, ugly, frustrated. But the boss has a habit of flattering the junior, and the junior has a habit of flattering the boss. This is a typical corporate culture. Mr. Bolam was pleased to see him. Actually, he was not. No, not in the true sense. Knife, good, gracias. You look 100% better. Actually, was not. Did you have a good holiday? Where did you go? Good heavens, what on earth did you do that for? So now Mr. Bolam is meeting. Now Mr. Bolam is meeting the scientist. अब साइंटिस्ट जो है मिस्टर बोलेम को बताएगा कि कैसे वो ये स्टोरी को आगे बढ़ाना चाहता है, कैसे उसका प्लान है, क्या प्लान है. सो नाउ मिस्टर बोलेम will be explained about all the systems, about all the rules, about how the machine will work.